Like in our world, the Pokemon world has a wide range of myths. The Sinnoh region in particular has more myths than all of the other regions combined. The top floor of the Canalave library is completely stocked with myths. We have creation myths, the big one being that of Arceus, who is born from a cosmic egg that appears at the center of the primordial chaos. Arceus then creates Dialga, Palkia, and maybe Giratina, as well as Mesprit, Azelf, and Uxie, and the world forms from there. We also have what are called etiological narratives. These are myths that explain something about how the world works. At Canalave Library, there's a book called Sinnoh Region's Mythology, not to be confused with the book Sinnoh Myth. These are very descriptive titles. Sinnoh Region's Mythology has a brief legend about why Pokemon appear in tall grass. That also fits very nicely with my theory on the origin of battles. We also have myths that suggest people came from Pokemon, and if we look to other regions, we see the origins of everything from Z-moves to the forces of nature and to the separation of land, sea, and sky. And as with the myths of our world, there are many ways that we can interpret them. Are they cultural stories used to explain the unexplainable? Or are they literal accounts of a historical fact? But that's actually not what I want to focus on today. For that, I recommend you listen to the most recent episode of Tin Tower Talks. It's exactly what I talk about with the Rune Maniac Files and Kaihatsu. What I actually want to focus on is a category of myth that the Pokemon world doesn't have. Not really. It's the hero's journey. Pokemon world myth, surprisingly, doesn't have heroes. At least not the Heracles and Gilgamesh kind of heroes who go on a journey and do great deeds and prove themselves. We do have heroes in Pokemon myth, but they are few. The only ones that I can think of in game canon anyway are the heroes of Galar, who were crowned kings after fighting alongside Zacian and Zamazenta during the Darkest Day, and the twin heroes of Truth and Ideals, who are the founders of Unova. They are called heroes, but they don't really go on heroes' journeys. I don't even know what makes the twin heroes all that heroic. They have a disagreement, the original dragon splits up, and they cause the destruction of Unova. What makes them heroes? But you may have picked up from the vocabulary that I'm using that we do have heroes in Pokemon, the player characters themselves. The story of Pokemon games follows very closely traditional mythic tropes and the classic structure of the hero's journey. In 1949, Joseph Campbell published his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Campbell was a literature professor specialized in comparative mythology, and in his book, he sets out his theory of the monomyth, showing how heroes' journey stories, both in myth and in modern fiction, including the Pokemon games, follows a very reliable pattern. So I want to go through Campbell's 17 stages of the monomyth and talk about the elements of the Pokemon games that fit them. Not every hero myth features all 17 stages, and they're not always in the same order, and Pokemon is no different. I also want to point out that Campbell's terminology is very male-centric, and that's not great. But we do have to keep in mind that mythic heroes are majority male. And also that Campbell's theory is 70 years old, so we can't expect it to be all that woke. Some of the archetypal roles that characters play in the monomyth are heavily male or female coded in Campbell's theory, but for our purposes, they don't necessarily have to be. I think you'll get what I mean, so let's get started. The 17 stages are divided into 3 sections, and the first one is the departure, when the hero sets out on their journey. The first stage is the Call of Adventure, and this is what every Pokemon game starts with, whether it's because it's your 10th birthday and all boys leave home eventually, or because you hear calls for help just outside of town. Often the hero is reluctant to go on this journey. This is not something that we usually see in Pokemon games. In fact, the protagonists have very little personality, but occasionally you do have the option of saying that you're not interested. Next, the hero receives some sort of supernatural aid or guidance from a mentor figure, like getting your starter Pokemon and a Pokedex from the local professor. Now that you are prepared for your adventure, it is time to cross the threshold out of the land of the everyday and into the land of adventure. In myth, this is often literally a different world, but in Pokemon, it's usually just stepping out into Route 1, out of the comfort and safety of your town and into the world of the unknown and into the belly of the whale. This is the first big challenge in the unknown. Sometimes the literal belly of an actual whale, but I think the best example of this in Pokemon is Viridian Forest, a deep and maze-like forest crawling with wild creatures and trainers itching to battle, far from any Pokemon centers or marts or any other points of safety. So when you emerge from that, you have proven that you are worthy of the adventure. The second section, the initiation, is where the meat of the games happen. The first stage here is also the most obvious and frequently the longest. It is the road of trials through which the hero proves themselves, like Heracles' Labors or the Gym Challenge. Next, we have those more gendered steps that I mentioned. One is the meeting with the goddess. This can come in a number of forms, like when Odysseus sleeps with Circe after she turns his crew into pigs in order to try to convince her to undo it. Or when Odysseus sleeps with Calypso because, well, she's hot and the gods haven't said no yet, and who cares that his wife is waiting back home anyway? I have to keep their names straight because Calypso and Circe, they have very similar names, and he sleeps with everyone. Or when Odysseus doesn't sleep with Athena, but getting her help anyway because they're old buddies from the Trojan War. But in Pokemon, I struggle to find a really significant example of this. There are often female characters who will give you some kind of assistance, like Lily giving you revive upon revive, or Sonia giving you revive upon revive and guiding your journey a little bit as well. But none of these meetings are all that significant. And many Pokemon games don't even have major non-player female characters, and any romance is subtextual at best, like with Shauna. But like I said, not every myth hits every point. The next one, though, is the woman as temptress, like when Odysseus sleeps with... I've said that already. But this is one that we can actually pull the gender out of the equation and just look at it as temptation, as an incentive to end the journey. In many Pokemon games, there is a member of the antagonist organization that tries to recruit you to their cause, like the Rocket at the end of Nugget Bridge. Next up is Atonement with the Father, which is another one that doesn't have to be gendered, and it can come in a number of forms. It can be literal, like the battle against Norman. But more generally, it involves earning approval from a mentor figure, like earning rewards for reaching certain benchmarks in Pokédex completion, for example. Or it could even take the form of a confrontation with an antagonist, like the final battle against Giovanni, or the battle against Lusamine. Pokemon is up to here in Atonement with the Father. The next stage is Apotheosis, which literally refers to when the hero achieves enlightenment and becomes a god. This is another rather obvious one, becoming the champion, but it can also apply to many story climaxes, like defeating Team Rocket or earning the trust of a legendary dragon. Pokemon also has an abundance of apotheoses, of moments when the player character becomes legendary. My favorite one, though, is Red, a player character who becomes legendary not only in the relatively small scale of his own game, like most player characters do, but actually on the scale of the entire franchise. And the final stage of the initiation section is when the hero obtains the ultimate boon, an object or weapon or something that either is the end of the journey, like the Holy Grail, or that allows the hero to complete the journey, like the Master Sword, because, like I said, these steps don't always happen in the right order. In Pokemon, I think the Master Ball is the most common ultimate boon, allowing the player to easily capture the legendary Pokemon. But in many cases where the legendary Pokemon voluntarily joins your party, I think the legendary itself can be considered the ultimate boon, helping the player to defeat the ultimate team, or to become champion, or being put away in the box forever. I don't know, it's not perfect. The last section is the return, when the hero, having completed their journey, must return to the everyday. This is not really very common in contemporary storytelling. The journey is over, the story is over. And in Pokemon, we don't even really have an option. We're just immediately transported back home after becoming champion. But there are some parallels that we can draw. Often, the hero isn't all that keen on going back to a life of normalcy, which could be why, in Pokemon, the player accepts the post-game quest without hesitation, eager to go on more journeys. Other times, the hero needs to flee from whatever their final confrontation may be, or even be rescued by an ally. Neither of these are stages that we really see in Pokemon, at least not that I can think of, except maybe in Sword and Shield, where in the battle with Eternatus, the player needs help not only from Hop, but from Zacian and Zamazenta. Without them, there is no defeating Eternatus, so it could be construed as a rescue. But finally, willingly or not, peacefully or not, the hero does cross the return threshold, going back to the land of the everyday. But having gone through this adventure and achieving some degree of enlightenment, the hero often becomes the master of the two worlds, able to transit freely between the everyday and the land of adventure, but also having the freedom to live at peace. I see these last three stages altogether represented by the end of the game, after the post-game story, when the player has the freedom to do whatever they want. Whether that's going on more adventures and taking on the battle tower or ranked battles or something more everyday, less adventure-y, like growing berries or hanging out with your Pokemon in camp. And that's it. That's all 17 stages of Campbell's monomyth of the hero's journey. And Pokemon touches on a surprising number of them. As much as we complain about the quality of Pokemon stories, and you know I do that all the time, it was interesting to realize that even these stories still follow a long tradition of hero myths. And part of the point of Campbell's monomyth theory was that the hero can be anyone. The hero can be all of us. And that's also kind of the point of Pokemon games, of making all of us into heroes. I got the idea for this video from watching Crash Course Mythology. I first watched it a few years ago, but it really stuck with me. This isn't sponsored or anything, but if you have any interest in mythology whatsoever, you should check it out. It's a 40-some episode course on world mythology hosted by Mike Rignetta, which you can watch for free on YouTube. This video was a little bit outside of my comfort zone, a lot more media analysis than I'm used to, so if you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate a like and a comment. Thank you to my patrons, especially luxury patron Ethan Saffron. I'm Umbreon Libris. I'll see you in the next chapter. Is this entertaining?